Hello and welcome back to the Boropolis Podcast YouTube channel. It feels like a little while since we've recorded one of these, but actually it's not, Nathan, is it? We recorded one last week, and thanks to the many wonders of technology, for some reason there was a major echo in the background. And to be honest, we both just agreed that it was actually unlistenable for anyone that was going to listen to it. So we decided, just basically made the executive decision to bounce back this week and hope that everything was all right. We've tried on two different devices. The echoing was still there, but I think we may have finally solved it. So from the last time we recorded a podcast, Nathan, we've had two games. I am now back in the UK. Newcastle lost a cup final, and it's been a bit of a sort of hectic 2 weeks trying to get this sorted, trying to figure out what's been going on. But how have you actually been for the last 2 weeks, Nathan?
Yeah, I've been all right. As you say, it feels like quite a long time since we've actually been able to record a podcast and then put out a podcast. So I'm sure that the listeners will be happy about that there is one coming with this episode. But yeah, I'm okay. Yeah, it helps that we are coming off the back of a Boro win this week, which is ideal. But yeah, what about yourself, Chris? Back into UK life, how are you feeling?
Yeah, the weather's not as nice as what it was in Bali, but apart from that, it's obviously nice to be home, and especially nice to be back at the Riverside, especially given yesterday's scoreline. Just before we do obviously move on into West Brom and obviously what we sort of missed or what we covered really in last week's podcast that will probably just never be heard by anyone else. But yeah, we probably do need it. Well, I guess we're not really sure where the problem was coming from, were we, the whole echo issue? So we'll apologise on behalf of both of us. But now, and fingers crossed, everything crossed, that I'm back in the UK, the connection should be better and the audio issue should have gone. So we're crossing everything. But of course, apologies, because this is meant to be a weekly podcast. But we haven't really been able to get that consistency last few weeks. But hopefully now issues are solved and we can get talking about this wonderful Middlesbrough team on a weekly basis. We have to rewind first, Nathan, don't we? And go back to last week. Obviously, I mean, we don't really want to spend too long talking about the game in any case. But just in terms of quickly touching on it, it was a game that was always going to be difficult. West Brom have got some very good players, but actually, the game was sort of over really inside the first 15 minutes, and from that point onwards, after those two Daryl Dike goals, Middlesbrough just couldn't really recover, could they?
No, they couldn't. It's always difficult when you concede one early goal to get back into the game, and Middlesbrough have done quite well to do that. In multiple games this season under Michael Carrick, going one down and recovering that deficit and turning things around and winning the game. But to go 2-0 down inside 10 minutes was a step too far for Michael Carrick's Middlesbrough. A difficult test. It was always going to be that, going to the Hawthorns to play West Brom. I've just got down here after that win for West Brom last week. That was 7 wins in their last 8 home games, and they've kept 7 clean sheets in that time as well. And I think one thing that must be said is to keep Middlesbrough out in the form that they were in front of goal against any side in the division, whether that be Sheffield United or Cardiff or Blackpool, as they all conceded 3 in recent weeks to this Middlesbrough side. The credit must be given to West Brom in keeping Middlesbrough out and keeping them quiet and getting that clean sheet. The aim for Middlesbrough, which they've done pretty well, is bounce back, and we had to bounce back with our next performance and our next result, and that was leading into Reading at the Riverside this week.
Yeah, and of course, just for a little bit of added context going into the game, obviously following our defeat last week, Sheffield United did capitalise it that game week and won their game, didn't they? But then again, with them being the early kickoff and being back in the Riverside concourse, there was that sort of nervous wait watching a Sheffield United game up against another playoff rival like they were against Millwall when there was that roar from the concourse late on in the Sheffield United game. But of course, they played Blackburn prior to our game kicking off yesterday, and of course were defeated. So it gave Middlesbrough the chance going into the game to narrow that gap back to what it was before, obviously, Boro's defeat and Sheffield United's win. And, you know, as much as the context of being able to close the gap was very important, as you mentioned, Nathan, I think just for the Middlesbrough team's confidence, for Michael Carrick's team that he's built and put together, it was crucial, really, that they bounce back. And I mean, as you've all also said, they couldn't have really bounced back in a better fashion, could they?
No, they couldn't. As I said, they've been quite good at bouncing back after defeats. They usually, when they do face a defeat, they bounce back with a run of wins, which is always a good sign of a good side. And the hope was that Middlesbrough bounced back from that defeat at West Brom with a win this game week against Reading and go on a little bit of a run of wins. And hopefully yesterday's result will be the kickstart. We will get into that. But prior to the game, looking at this one in itself with Reading, they are a funny side. I think that's fair to say. They usually do really, really well at home at the Select Car Leasing Stadium, and then away from home, their away record is pretty pitiful, really. I think in their last 5 away games, they've been defeated in all and only scored 1 goal away from home. So looking at that and the typical Middlesbrough hat on, a lot of fans yesterday, it could have been one of those games that upset the form book, upset the bookies as well. And yeah, luckily for Middlesbrough, it wasn't to be. But going into the game, 2 changes to the side that was defeated at the Hawthorns last week, Chris. Paddy McNair dropping out of the squad completely after being clotheslined by Daryl DK in the second half last week. And Marcus Force also dropping to the bench. Dale Fry and Aaron Ramsey coming into the Middlesbrough starting 11. What did you make of those changes, Chris? Were you quite pleased with those, or was there a little bit of apprehension with Ramsey coming in and Force being dropped out after Force has been in and out of the side in the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, I think obviously the Paddy McNair one was sort of expected after seeing the state of his face after, as you say, he was clotheslined by Daryl DK. I don't think anyone was holding out much hope that he was going to be playing against Reading. And then, yeah, as you say, it was, I guess, more of a shock to see Force drop out. You know, we've spoke about him a lot on this podcast and about how that position on the right, it still doesn't look quite right when he's out there, but he's just so effective. And I do think since he first got into that role on the right, he's massively developed, even, you know, skipping ahead a little bit, but even his ability to get past his fullback. And obviously he won a penalty from that yesterday when he was introduced. But yeah, I was a little bit shocked and not perhaps apprehensive, but definitely I personally thought he would have started. We've seen Michael Carrick, even when his team get beat, tends to sort of stick with the same team and let them, I guess, put the previous results behind them and sort of build on it themselves to bounce back. But yeah, Aaron Ramsey, I guess he's still somewhat of an unknown quantity. Obviously, we saw him start against, I can't even think of the game, Nathan.
QPR, I think it was, wasn't it?
QPR it was. Then I really just had complete bit of brain fog there, to be honest. I mean, I'm sure Paddy McNair will be having a bit of brain fog, not brain frog, dear me. But yes, an unknown quantity started that game against QPR, and I don't think he perhaps impressed as much as he may have hoped to. Obviously, he was substituted in the game. I didn't quite have a huge impact. Obviously, he was introduced last week as well against West Brom and didn't really have too much of an impact. So, yeah, that was somewhat of a shock, but obviously, I think we all trust Michael Carrick to know the qualities that Aaron Ramsey brings to this Middlesbrough team. And obviously, it sort of worked out for him, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. So now getting into the game, I think that it was going the way that everyone sort of expected in the early stages. Boro, as I say every week on this podcast, dominate the ball and look to try and sort of impose their own game on the opposition, whether that's home or away these days. It seems to be the regular theme. And they didn't really threaten too much in the early stages with known chances, big chances. But yeah, the breakthrough was made from the penalty spot this week. What did you make of the penalty, Chris? Ramsey coming in from the left-hand side and quite cleverly just chipping the ball onto Andy Yedom's outstretched arm. It was pretty much nailed on that it was a penalty. No complaints really from Reading, but I think if you are a Reading fan in that situation and your player has conceded a penalty just by having his arms, it's not in a unnatural position really. Would you feel a bit hard done by with that decision if you were a Reading fan, Chris?
Yeah, I think having not seen it back actually, and obviously being in the stadium and seeing it live, the view wasn't particularly great from obviously where we sit in the stadium in the sort of lower west. But I think a lot of the time in these penalty situations or decisions, it's almost, you can tell by the reaction of the player that it's given against, and there wasn't all too much of an argument, obviously from Yedom, and I think that tells its own story really, and it's good work from Aaron Ramsey actually, because he was doing it quite often, getting into those little pockets in and around the box and trying to play those neat passes or neat little chips in behind Reading's back line, and obviously he ended up winning the penalty from it. And I think it was so crucial, of course, just in terms of Reading's game plan, that we took the lead around about when we did, because the longer that wait for the first goal had have gone on, I'm sure the nerves would have kicked in more. And, in games like that, it seems like the away side parking the bus seem to get luckier throughout the game, the longer that they don't concede for. So, yeah, a crucial time and obviously a crucial moment in Middlesbrough history, to put it lightly.
Yeah, it was, of course, a bit different to the game against QPR where Cameron Archer grabbed the ball as a decoy for Chuba. Chuba was straight up for this one, put his name in the hat, grabbed hold of that ball, put it down on the spot. And there was sort of the moment where usually at the Riverside, in and around us, especially in the lower west stand, not many people stand up for penalties, just because that's just the way it goes at times, where you're not really sure if a Middlesbrough player is going to score or miss. And that is the same for Chuba Akpom as well, really. He's been a bit hit and miss from the penalty spot so far this season. But everyone was sort of on their feet halfway at least. Some had the cameras out, because, of course, this was going to be the moment that a Middlesbrough player was going to score the 20th league goal of a quite remarkable season. And he sends Dean Bazounis the wrong way. He rolls it to the keeper's right into the bottom corner, and the celebration will probably go down in Middlesbrough folklore a little bit as well. Standing on the advertising hoardings in front of the South Stand to pay homage to the last Middlesbrough player to score 20 plus league goals, which was, of course, Bernie Slaven. So a quite incredible moment for me and yourself, Chris, especially because we are Middlesbrough fans that probably just about missed the good times. And me and yourself have had to watch some dross growing up, and to see a Middlesbrough player finally score 20 goals in the league in a league season is quite a wonderful moment, and it couldn't happen to a better man as well. We all see what Chuba's like as a personality in his interviews and things like that, and yeah, he's a credit to himself, and he deserves 20 league goals this season.
Yeah, he does. He really does. And as you say, it's not just the footballer who was blossomed into such an integral part of this Michael Carrick team. You know, he's had that slight change of position. He hasn't played as an out-and-out number 9, but his link-up play, his passing ability, his ability to run past people and make it look effortless really is... I mean, it's been incredible this season. Even if he probably had half of the goals tallied that what he does, it would have been just of an impressive season from Chuba Akpom. And yeah, as you mentioned, obviously we're of that age where we sort of just missed the real good times in this club's history. And I mean, it's been even longer since fans have seen a 20 goal a season striker. And for so many years, you've sort of looked at the names linked with Middlesbrough. You've looked at the names that we've signed, some of the transfer fees. And you've always thought, surely it might be this one. Obviously, Patrick Bamford went close. Britta Sombalonga, we all thought he would be the answer. I mean, Alvaro Negredo, okay, yes, that was in the Premier League, and I don't think anyone really thought he was going to achieve that. But when you think of the level of striker that he was, and obviously the teams that he played for, and then you think of some of the players which, I mean, not for 1 minute you ever thought would even score a goal for Middlesbrough, but they still managed to sort of kid everyone into getting games as a striker. I mean, there's plenty of names we can go into, but I actually don't want to. I want this moment to be about how good Chuba's been and not how bad some of our other strikers have been. But yeah, as you say, a great moment and a really nice touch from Chuba, who obviously sort of emulate Bernie Slaven climbing on the gate at Ayrsham by getting on the advertising boards and sort of just posing like somewhat of a god figure, really. And I mean, in most Middlesbrough fans' eyes, I think that's what he already is, to be honest. And yeah, it was not a moment that I think anyone in that stadium would have ever expected. I mean, we could talk for a whole podcast just about Chuba Akpom's redemption arc. But just fantastic, wasn't it? I wasn't confident, in all honesty, when he stepped up for the penalty. I thought it was too much of a typical Boro type moment where he would have this chance and then miss and then just not get a chance for the rest of the season. But no, obviously he tucks it away. And yeah, I mean, who'd have thought when we started joking about a metaphorical trade at the start of the season, laughing about him. I mean, truthfully, laughing about even the thought of him playing for Boro this season at the start of the year, obviously after everything that he went through under Chris Wilder. And then you have that moment where he breaks, I think it's 33 years, isn't it, since we've had a 20 goal a season striker in the league. And yeah, remarkable. And congratulations to Chuba Akpom, because what an absolute hero he is.
He is. I think at the start of the season, he's the man that you would least have expected to, well, one, not only be leading the line for Middlesbrough, but to have his name in the conversation as the Championship top goal scorer and probably player of the season at this moment in time, really, in the Championship. His name's in the hat 100%. It is the redemption arc of all redemption arcs. It is truly a fantastic, fantastic story. And Chuba Akpom, in his post-match interview yesterday, paying homage to the Chuba train itself with the choo 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 line given to Mark Drury. So yeah, a fantastic moment for Middlesbrough fans to have that striker finally get 20 league goals. And also it makes it fantastic for me as well that he's done it in March. It's not as if it's the end of the season yet. We've still got 11 league games to go. And it seems like it usually, as a Middlesbrough fan, and putting that typical Boro hat on once again, it'd seem sort of written in the stars that Chuba would have missed that penalty yesterday, as you said, Chris, and that it'd be like a little bit of a monkey on his back for the rest of the season, where he's won away and it might be a little bit more difficult to get that final one. But yesterday, stepped up, made no mistake, and I mean, we'll get on to later on in the game a little bit further, but yeah, he's now on his way to 30, isn't he? So it's just amazing. But yeah, moving on into the rest of the first half, because we've given Chuba Akpom all the plaudits in the world for that 20 league goals. But as I say, he's on 21 now. But yeah, now there was a penalty incident, but up the other end of the pitch, it must have been the first moment in the game where Reading even ventured out of their own half, and it seemingly is a massive talking point in the game, especially for Paul Ince, who we'll get onto a little bit later on in the podcast. But yeah, Reading on the edge of the Middlesbrough box. I think it's Tom Ince that slides the ball in behind, and Shane Long gets goal side of Tommy Smith. Tommy Smith's doing his best to put Long off the shot, and Long goes to ground, Smith goes to ground. Stefan is there trying to close down the angle, and the ball rolls it looks like it's rolling just wide anyway, and Tommy Smith recovers and gets it away from danger. But what did you make of this one, Chris? I've looked at it again, and I think that it is 50-50. I think that Tommy Smith is trying to play the ball. He's almost trying to scoop the ball from Shane Long and get it back into a position where he can then clear the ball. And I've also looked at the reactions of the Reading players who, after the initial sort of appeal, none of them are really that fussed. But what did you initially make of this decision, Chris, in this moment in the game?
Yeah, it was certainly a nervy moment in the game, wasn't it, really? Because, as you say again, it was the first moment in the game where Reading actually realised that they were able to attack. And it was a bit of a hairy one, wasn't it? It was certainly one where you sort of grimace as obviously a Middlesbrough fan in this situation. I don't know. I think it probably is 50-50, as you say. There wasn't huge appeals from Reading. Obviously, Paul Ince feels very aggrieved by the decision, but I don't know. It wasn't. It didn't look blatant to me. And as you say, obviously, seeing the replay back, it's still 50-50 a little bit, to be honest. So yeah, I can understand Paul Ince's complaints about that specific decision. But obviously, I mean, with his comments about the rest of the game and how it panned out, I don't think we should really be listening to Paul Ince as to anything from his side's 5-0 thumping. So yeah, it was it was a little bit of a worrying situation, but obviously we got off on the right side of that, and then fortunately we then get our second and get well on our way to bouncing back from obviously the West Brom result.
Yeah, but just before that second goal as well, Chris, I think I'd like to mention a moment
out the box.
A moment in the game where Dean Bazounis has come flying towards the edge of his 18-yard box and has got his hands on the ball. And as he's sprinting out, and I can see that what he's trying to do, which is, of course, gather the ball in his arms. I think that he's overcooked this, and he's flown out of his penalty box, and he's still got his hands on the ball. Riley McGree's there, looks to take the ball from Bazounis, and the referee has, I think, bottled this one. I think that's just fair to say. He's given a foul against Riley McGree for kicking the ball when it's in Bazounis' one hand.
Yeah.
Outside of the area. Did you think that at the time Bazounis was outside of the area? It is now confirmed, as I have seen a screenshot on Twitter of the ball miles outside the area. What did you make of this one, Chris, at the time? Because of course, if the referee had given this decision, it would have resulted in a sending off for the Reading goalkeeper.
Yeah, I think obviously we've seen photographic evidence now of that screenshot. I think I saw the same one as you. Obviously, that's been doing the rounds on Twitter, and it's clear to see now that it's a mistake from the referee. The only thing, I guess, and not that referees should do this, but it did feel as though maybe if he had have given the Reading penalty, obviously the Shane Long incident, he may have given this one as well. And it sort of felt to me it was a bit of a levelling up act. I don't know if you agree, but it looked blatant. And obviously then you see the screenshot and everyone's thoughts were confirmed. It was a real strange one to penalise Riley McGree for doing nothing wrong. But it was, for me, probably the referee just sort of levelling it out and making up potentially for that penalty incident.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. And then going on for Middlesbrough's second goal of the game, Chuba Akpom nearly gets his 21st goal of the season, a header that hits the post and then comes off Bazounis, a close one. But I think after the first goal of the game, the penalty, I think it was always going to be very, very comfortable for Middlesbrough, and it was a matter of when and not if that they were going to double, triple, quadruple the lead. And it actually comes in stoppage time at the end of the first half, and Reading have ventured forward and have a set play that is cleared as far as Amadou Mbeng, who was in Reading's back four yesterday afternoon. And a heavy touch is, I think it's fair to say, pounced upon by Aaron Ramsey, who then runs the length of the pitch with the ball. Riley McGree by his side uses Riley McGree as a fantastic decoy pass and just bends the ball into the far corner, doubles the lead, kills the game before half-time, and it made the afternoon very, very comfortable from then on, didn't it, Chris?
Yeah, it did. And to be truthfully honest, Nathan, for what felt like an age as he was bearing down on goal, I was literally saying out loud, don't be greedy, don't be greedy, don't be greedy, pass the ball, pass the ball. Just because I thought, we've seen sort of those Duncan Watmore-esque misses. And I don't want that to sound like slander for Duncan Watmore because, overall he did a very good job for Middlesbrough. But I think we all know some of the misses that I'm obviously referencing. And it felt like one of those potential situations. So I wanted him to square it. And then I think by the end, actually, where Ramsey slows down, I guess, to make his mind up, actually, Riley McGree's then ahead of the ball, and Ramsey sort of decides rightfully to shoot, and obviously he buries it. And it's actually one of those situations in football where if he hadn't missed, the typical cliche commentator phrase would have been, "Oh, he almost had too much time to think about it." And he did have a lot of time to think about what he was going to do. And obviously we'll never know, but he may have made his mind up early, he may not have, but obviously he makes the right decision in the end. And it's actually, I think it deserves probably a little bit more credit than he's actually got for that goal. Because as I say, he's probably imagined 101 situations just as he's bearing down on goal. So, credit to Ramsey. And obviously, I guess, makes that impact that Carrick thought he might, and probably shut a few people up, including, I'd say, myself, to be honest, because when I first saw the team, as I mentioned, it was a bit of a shock, and I thought that it was harsh on Fours, really. So, yeah, a great impact from Ramsey. And obviously, at that point in the game, I sort of felt that was the game put to bed.
Yeah, it was. Just reiterating your point there, Chris. Fantastic from Aaron Ramsey. He charges down that loose touch from Mbeng, and his composure in front of goal to bend that in the far corner as well as he does is fantastic, and it's a great celebration as well. I think I should get that in there. I do love that celebration. Going into the second half, I've had a nightmare again, Chris, because this always seems to happen with me at the Riverside, where I will be downstairs and Boro score immediately after half time, and yeah, I've missed another goal, and this one comes from the man himself again, Mr. 20 league goals, now 21, Chuba Akpom. And watching it again, it's a fantastic move. Ramsey involved once again. He was flying all over the place in this game, just being found all over the pitch, picking up pockets, just always involved. And he plays a ball into Cameron Archer. Cameron Archer flicks one round the corner for Giles. Giles, the cross is sublime, really, side-footed with that left foot. And it completely takes the Reading defenders out of the game. Chuba's flying in at the back post, and he gets on the end of it, puts Boro 3 to the good, gets his 21st goal of the season, and I was sprinting up the stairs from the concourse to celebrate the goal.
Yeah, I didn't even realise that, because obviously usually after we score, I sort of look down in your direction almost to give you a nod of approval that, yeah, we're quite good, aren't we? But I didn't see that, and I wish I had off, because I know how much you'll have been annoyed at yourself for actually missing the goal. But yeah, it was a superb move. And Ryan Giles is back on that assist trail. He'd had, by his standards, it's been quite a while since he actually got an assist. But obviously he's back amongst them, and then adds to his tally shortly after this one. But yeah, terrific move. Great movement from Chuba, steaming at the back post. And yeah, it's just on the money. Couldn't really have been on a plate more from Ryan Giles' delivery. And then, I mean, you referenced Ramsey's celebration. I don't know if you saw this or you have since seen it, but basically Chuba Akpom just decides to, I can't think of what they're called, but basically, the inflatable sort of like cheese string looking things, sometimes that they have at like American car garages. I just can't think of what they're called, but he's basically replicated one of them in his celebration. Don't know where that's come from, but yeah, it was very funny, and it just epitomised the mood in the Riverside, didn't it, really? It was time for a bit of a mini party to celebrate Chuba breaking, obviously, the curse of the 20-goal a season striker.
Yeah, and at a time where for Boro, it's fantastic to watch us, and it has been pretty much every game so far under Michael Carrick. And when you think that it couldn't get any better, it does. And Boro go 4 to the good. Again, Aaron Ramsey scoring his second goal in Middlesbrough colours, his second goal of the day. And McGree is sublime for this goal, dropping deep this time instead of dropping into pockets. Instead, he's picked up the ball pretty much where the defenders are stood, and he's played a fantastic lofted ball down the left-hand side for Ryan Giles, who at the start of play, as you said, hadn't had too many assists recently. He'd been on an assist drought, and Dan Barlasser had overtaken him in the Championship Playmaker Award. And Dan Barlasser had got 8 and Ryan Giles had got 7. Giles' assist for the third got them level, and this one set Giles on his way to the top with his 9th assist of the season. This ball is fantastic. He's got his head up and he's picked out Ramsey, who's sort of coming in and arriving late, and he's put it right on his toe. Ramsey's took a touch, steadied himself, and I mean, it does help that Naby Sarr sat down for him, and yeah, he's bent it in the far corner once again, and it just felt like you were watching Brazil, really, because yes, Reading were really, really bad, but Middlesbrough looked really, really, really good. And that is fantastic to see and watch every week as a Middlesbrough fan at the Riverside. And we weren't done, were we, Chris?
No, we certainly weren't. And as I say, Marcus Force obviously impacting the game. Probably felt in himself a little bit hard done by not to start. Comes on the right, and as I mentioned earlier, shows, I guess, what he's learned since he's been out on that right flank. Manages to burst past his fullback, and actually something that obviously hasn't just come to light yesterday, but something perhaps that people wouldn't really think of Marcus Force about as a footballer. He's actually quite deceivingly quick, isn't he? Over 5 yards. I mean, he burst past the fullback that's attempting to keep up with him, and then is just bundled to the ground. And I guess the surprise in this one is that one of the two boys on 2 goals on then the penalty taker. And yeah, it just epitomises really the team spirit, because the person that wins it goes back to the old school saying of make us, take us. And yeah, Marcus Force makes it, and he takes the penalty. But I've got to be honest, if I'm Chuba Akpom in this situation, he's a nicer man than I am, because I'm furious and I want the penalty, not only to add to my tally, but to get another match ball.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there, Chris. Chuba Akpom is the designated penalty taker at the club and should be given the ball. But when asked about this post-match, Michael Carrick was asked for what he was thinking in the moment when Force is stepping up with the ball, and he just said, just hope he'd score, because it puts all sort of question marks or negative points to bed if he puts the ball in the back of the net. And he does just that. He smashes it down the middle. It does come off Bazounis, but it's in the back of the net, and that's all that matters. Middlesbrough hit 5 at home for what feels like forever. That was the club's biggest win by I think it was by the margin, not by the scoreline, but by the margin of 5 goals. For I think it was 2008 the club posted that was the biggest win since 2008, which is a great stat, because
in the league was that?
I think it was in the league, yeah. And it's a great stat because, as we mentioned earlier, yourself and I have watched plenty of dross over the years.
Yeah.
We didn't see those good times, and I think the last time I can remember us scoring 5 was Millwall away in the playoff season under Aitor Karanka. But apart from that, if my memory does treat me right, I can't remember another occasion that has happened. So, yeah, it is good to score 5 goals, 2 players getting braces, and of course Marcus Forss coming off the bench and getting another goal as well, it's just beautiful to be a Middlesbrough fan at this moment in time.
Yeah, it is. It is. Just on the 5 goals, I'm for some reason thinking of a cup game against Peterborough where perhaps we scored 5. And also, I want to say that we scored 5 against Peterborough last season, but it may have actually only been 4. Yeah, 4. I actually seem to remember Rudy Gestead playing in that 5-0 win against Peterborough in the Cup. So, I mean, speaking of bad strikers that we mentioned earlier in the podcast, 5 goals with him, that man on the pitch is a achievement in itself. Another stat that I actually saw yesterday, which impressed me even more, was the fact that yesterday's scoreline took us to a goals tally that actually beats our goals tally from last season. And then obviously you consider that we have 11 league games left as well. I mean, that stretch of games last year where everyone will always remember Chris Wilder for, despite, what obviously the way it panned out and the way things sort of happened. But we seem to be quite freely scoring in some of them games as well. But it just goes to show how well and how many goals this Michael Carrick team has scored, because I can't really remember us freely scoring as much forever, to be honest. It's, as you say, a beautiful time to be a Middlesbrough fan, and I just hope it doesn't stop anytime soon, to be honest, because obviously we're on the tails of Sheffield United. And I think I said this in a previous podcast. I might well have actually said it in last week's one that just won't obviously ever be heard because of the audio issues. But even if we don't catch Sheffield United now, I think it's going to be a season that's incredibly fondly remembered. And from the situation we were in against Coventry at the start of the season, obviously before Wilder was given his marching orders, it really is chalk and cheese. Everything that this Michael Carrick team has and is showing is everything that just didn't even feel possible under Chris Wilder at the start of this campaign. So yeah, obviously that points gap's been narrowed. We've obviously also quite importantly added very nicely to our goal difference, which could prove to be, massive come the end of the season. And yeah, one of the biggest, perhaps, positives of the day was the fact that actually Andy Carroll didn't do anything. And obviously, again, an exclusive because no one would have heard our podcast following last week's game. In the preview for, obviously, the Reading game, I pretty much just expressed my complete fear to a man with a beard and a man bun, which is not something that a lot of people would perhaps be terrified of, but I'm certainly terrified of that man, Andy Carroll, of course. He has such a decent record against us previously. And I mean, even that looping header last year, it felt like it took about 10 minutes to come down and loft over Joe Lumley's head. So I was expecting something similar yesterday. But actually, by the end of the game, Andy Carroll just looked like he wanted to be anywhere but the other side. He was just sort of... There was one moment in the second half where I think it was already 5, and he gets the ball in the right channel, and there's actually no one on. There's not even a pass to play, and he just passes it straight back to us. And I just thought, you're done. You're done. I don't want to slag him off too much, actually, Nathan, because he could well do us a favour on Tuesday night. But Andy, you didn't terrify me half as much, or even at all, like I thought you would yesterday. So that was one major positive as well.
It is a massive positive. To have those players that seemingly always score against you, not score against you, is a lovely feeling. And yeah, I think yesterday was probably the perfect day, the perfect way to bounce back after that defeat last week at West Brom. To win the game is one thing, but to win it so comfortably and by such an incredible margin as well is massive for confidence, and hopefully that this Middlesbrough side will hopefully kick on and go on a run like they have previously done following defeats. So I think one thing that we should talk about is Fortress Riverside. It's becoming quite the feeling going to games at the Riverside, and it was the same under Chris Wilder last year for a spell where we went 8 wins on the spin at home under Wilder. But so far under Carrick, I don't want to jinx it, in the league, because of course there was Brighton in the FA Cup who are performing extraordinarily well and in the quarterfinals of that competition now. In the league, we are unbeaten under Michael Carrick. I think that is now 7 wins and 1 draw at home under our manager. And I don't want to jinx things, because we sort of did this last year and it sort of came back to bite us on the backside a little bit, but it feels good to go to home games at this moment in time and be confident in the side to put on a good display and earn positive results. And it's been a pleasure again in a spell that's gone over Christmas. It always makes me feel better when the spell goes over Christmas for some reason, but last year it was the 8 wins in a row from when Wilder came in. I think it was from the start of December till March, and it's been quite similar again under Michael Carrick. And yeah, long may it continue, because it's really good to go to the Riverside, and the atmosphere is seemingly just never really negative, even though we came off the back of a defeat yesterday, off the back of a defeat last week. Going into this game yesterday, the atmosphere just didn't seem to be at all negative. It's just jubilant at every opportunity at this moment in time. And I suppose that does sort of echo the mood of most fans that, yes, okay, we got beat last week, but we have faith in this team to come back, to bounce back and earn a positive result once again.
Yeah, as you say, obviously home form is so important in any league, in any level of football. And it's, again, the cliche sort of saying, and I think it gets used the most amongst Championship fans, especially, where people say, if you win your home games and draw your away games, you'll end the season in, a very healthy position. And that's sort of what Middlesbrough are managing to do at the moment. And you've also put down in the notes, which is such a good trait to have as a team, bounce back ability. I think now the fact that we bounce back so emphatically and have done as well, not just on this occasion, makes me feel almost more confident about this Middlesbrough team. It's such a good trait to have, as I've said. And, when teams are able to do that, you sort of feel like it almost reflects the positive dressing room. The fact that even after last week's result, yes, it was disappointing, but none of them have sulked or got the head down. They thought, right, let's get back to it on Monday and let's have a great week of training and then put a show on. And even Michael Carrick referenced it yesterday. He said, all week I was delighted with the way that the team trained. And obviously that reflected on the pitch. And I know it's easy to talk about how perhaps Reading weren't very good. And yes, that is somewhat true. They weren't. But also, I think if you put us up against many other teams in this division yesterday, it probably would have been a similar scoreline because the build-up play, the possession, the cutting edge, the clinicalness of some of the finishes, it was a really impressive performance.
Yeah, it was. And of course, we spoke about Sheffield United and their result yesterday, which of course was a defeat to Blackburn. One thing that should be said as well, because I did say this last week in the podcast that will not be going up because of the echo, but looking over our shoulder as well, because I don't want to get too carried away, but the playoff picture is just something unbelievable this season. Of course, I am going to include Sheffield United in that because there is talk from not only Middlesbrough fans and Sheffield United fans, but Sky and all the other papers are on it that Middlesbrough are sort of on the shoulders of Sheffield United. So just the results this weekend: Sheffield United, Millwall, Watford, Sunderland and West Brom all dropped points this weekend. All of them losing apart from Watford, who drew at home to Preston. And then looking at some of the sides that won that are inside that playoff picture as well. Blackburn, who are just behind us, beat Sheffield United, of course. Luton won, Norwich won, and Coventry, a side that have come from nowhere really, have won and have found themselves 3 points behind 6th place, which is Norwich. It's quite an incredible league again, Chris. It's so tight, and it just goes to show that anyone can beat anyone as well in this league. It goes to show that, as I say, anyone can beat anyone. Sunderland in and around that playoff picture, playing Stoke yesterday afternoon and getting thumped 5-1 at the Stadium of Light by their former manager. It goes to show that anyone in this league is capable of receiving a beating, and it also puts an even more positive spin on Middlesbrough's win yesterday, because Reading are down there and struggling, and of course have had bad news this week with the possibility of a 6 points deduction on their shoulders, but it could have been the case yesterday that Reading came out the traps quite well and put themselves about Middlesbrough and got a positive result. But Middlesbrough, professional as ever, go into that game, get 3 points emphatically, and build confidence for what will be another difficult test against a side that are currently struggling. But I think that you'll agree they are a good side despite the league position. And that is, of course, Swansea, who we travel to next week for a game at the Swancom Stadium.
Yeah, we travel to the Swancom Stadium. I mean, what a name for a stadium. Do you know what? Truthfully, I didn't even know that it was no longer the Liberty Stadium. But yeah, I mean, I actually, quite funnily enough, think that is a terrific name, especially for a Swansea stadium. But yeah, without waffling too much about names of stadiums, as you say, Swansea probably in a similar mould almost to West Brom. The league position perhaps doesn't really match up with the type of test that they probably are going to give you. We know what type of team they are under Russell Martin. They'll try and keep the ball as much as possible. They've got some really interesting players. Joel Pirot, always a danger, always a threat. And some people still talk of him in the regard of being up there with one of the best players in the division. And, on his day, I don't think you could argue that, to be honest. But yeah, travelling to Wales, I mean, I always feel a little bit scarred from Swansea away just because of that Rudy Gestede miss. And also, in fairness, the whole debacle of Gavin Ward and the Sam Morsey penalty incident. I think it was Sam Morsey at least. It may have been George Saville actually that gave the last minute penalty away.
Yeah, it was.
That was even debated to be not a penalty. We also scored in the game and it was just disallowed for no reason, really. Yeah, a funny old time that was. And yeah, it's give us some nice memories, but it's also give us some real quite horrible ones, to be honest, and some really, really poor performances. So yeah, I always do worry about going to Swansea, but hopefully the man that just seems to love playing against Welsh teams, Riley McGree, might have another say in this game and hopefully send us on our way to another, well, what would be a huge victory, wouldn't it, Nathan?
Yeah, it would be. As you say, Riley McGree there scored on his first visit to last season was the Liberty Stadium in a Middlesbrough shirt, scored with a deflected effort that came in off the bar, and he scored against them in the home fixture this season as well. That was a 2-1 win under Chris Wilder, one of his 2 wins as Middlesbrough manager this season, so it's fantastic. And just thinking about the last visit to Swansea, of course, there was that Riley McGree goal. But there was also a Aaron Connolly through-on goal in the 93rd minute that, had we scored that goal, it probably would have sort of turned our season on its head and got us well and truly back in the playoff picture. And he's sort of kicked the ball into the ground and it's trickled off the post. And yeah, that would have been a fantastic result, but it wasn't to be. Here's to hoping that our strikers can be a little bit more clinical than old Aaron Connolly next week. But yeah, as you say, Chris, Swansea, good side. We've got a lot of good players. They, of course, are the same Swansea that were in the Premier League a few years ago in the same style. Is what I'm referring to with the possession-based football that they love to play down there. And at times, it's caught them a little bit cold, where they'll try and play out from the back. And as is the case with Championship players, they are prone to mistakes and they'll lose the ball because they aren't Man City. And yeah, that's why they concede a lot of goals. As it happens, I watched the EFL highlight show last night and they did say that Swansea are the side that have scored and conceded combined the goals that scored and conceded are the most in the Championship. So hopefully there will be goals in this game, but for the away side. And this is the last away game before the international break. I can't believe that the international break is creeping up on us, because I don't really want club football to be interrupted at this moment in time. Michael Carrick perhaps may want to be having some time on the training ground, some time to rest and recuperate before the run-in. But I can't get enough of Middlesbrough at this moment in time. And the hope is that we go to Swansea next week and get what would be a massive, massive 3 points on the road. And looking at some of the fixtures next week as well, it'd be massive for us to get 3 points there. Sheffield United are at home to Luton next Saturday afternoon. In the week, they're playing their game in hand against Reading, going off the basis of what we saw from Reading yesterday. I'm not going to hold out too much hope that they're going to do anything in midweek. But QPR under Gareth Ainsworth, they've got Watford in the playoff race, and Stoke, who, as we mentioned, thumped Sunderland 5-1 at the Stadium of Light. I've got Blackburn, who are currently 2 points behind Middlesbrough in 4th place. So 3 points away at Swansea. The importance of that could not be understated. Let's hope that Middlesbrough can go there and get the job done.
Yeah, let's cross everything possible and hope that we can, as you've mentioned in the notes, Nathan, get another run going, because it would be the perfect time. And yeah, I mean, even the fact that you've mentioned the international break there feels quite upsetting, to be honest, because although it's probably going to be integral just to, as you say, rest and recuperate, it is a bit of a kick in the teeth, isn't it? When your side are playing so well, you sort of think, oh, well, actually, this might kill a bit of our momentum. But actually, I'm sure Michael Carrick will kind of, be quite deep down, maybe he's happy about the fact that he gets more time on the training pitch with his Middlesbrough players, and hopefully he can implement some even more beautiful football. Because, I mean, to go with the phrase of let him cook, I don't know what he's going to be cooking up over the international break, but it could be scary for the rest of the division. I hope that doesn't come back to bite me in the arse, but who knows? It may well do. But yeah, Nathan, that is obviously us for this week. Just to reiterate again, obviously we're just as disappointed as perhaps anyone listening may have been when they didn't get a weekly episode. It's not really on from ourselves. It's really quite disappointing, especially given that we recorded the full thing and then just went basically to edit it and get it uploaded, and then realised that there was this echo that had appeared from nowhere. But yes, good to be back. Hopefully, upon the ending of this recording, we don't have the same problem, because that would be very demoralising. But yeah, Nathan, good to be back recording. Good to bounce back. And Boro scored 5 goals. I mean, it doesn't really get much better, does it?
No, it doesn't. A podcast that, we had to skip over West Brom quite quickly, but 3 points to celebrate this week. 5 goals for Middlesbrough and shipped by Sunderland, which is always fantastic. Newcastle got beat as well, and they're falling apart in the Premier League. So it's always an ideal time to celebrate. And lastly, Middlesbrough have a striker that has scored 20 league goals. It's like a dream, Chris.
It is. I'm waiting for someone to wake me up, and I'm sure Chuba Akpom feels the exact same, to be honest. But yeah, I think that's really the line that we've got to end on, isn't it, Nathan? Middlesbrough have a striker that has scored 20 league goals. Remarkable stuff. But yes, from us, thank you ever so much for watching and listening. And as always, if you have watched on YouTube, please do subscribe. If you haven't yet, give the video a like. And of course, for audio listeners, it would be lovely if you could give us a 5-star rating for this 5-goal Middlesbrough performance. And yes, it's good to be back. I feel like I've said that about 17 times, to be honest, but it is, because it's enjoyable when Middlesbrough play well, and we certainly did yesterday. But I'll stop waffling and leave it there. So thanks once again, and that has been another episode of the Boropolis Podcast.